welcome to today's web conference. I'm Monica from TechnoFocus, and I'll be serving as your moderator today. Today's session will be presented by Rohit Gulati from Microsoft. He's a technologist with 16 plus years of industry experience and has been serving different roles at Microsoft over the years. In his current role, Rohit is the Global EMEA Cloud Solution Architect based in London and supporting partners in building secure solutions on Microsoft Azure. He's a public speaker at both Microsoft internal and external events. He'll be your presenter throughout the series on Exam Prep AZ500 Microsoft Azure Security Technologies. He'll be kickstarting this series with today's session on managing identity and access. If you face any audio or video issues during the webcast, please don't hesitate to post your queries in the Q&A panel, and our team is here to answer them all. Also, if you have any technical questions related to today's topic, please feel free to ask those as well. Now I'd like to turn today's event over to your presenter. Rohit, you have the floor.
Hello and welcome to this exam prep series on Microsoft Exam AZ500. Microsoft Azure Security Technologies. My name is Rohit Gulati and I'm a Cloud Solution Architect in Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft around 12 years now. I'm based out of London and my focus area is around infrastructure, management and cybersecurity. I'm a Microsoft Azure Solution Architect expert. I'm also certified for Azure DevOps Solution, Azure AI Engineer, and I'm also certified for Microsoft Azure Security Engineer, which is AZ500. To start off, I just want to set the stage by mentioning it to you how we would do these exam prep series. It's a 4-module series, and in terms of session flow, we'll start by giving a very high-level overview of the Microsoft certifications and the certification path. Then we'll go to AZ500. We will cover the high-level agenda for AZ500, and then we'll look at Module 1. We'll do a series of presentations, and I'll do a set of demos as well. And in the end, I'll cover a set of sample questions and share some learning resources. So post this session and post this exam series, you could use those resources for your learning. So let's start by talking about the Microsoft certification and the certification path. If you look at this slide, it talks about solution areas. Azure has App and Infra and Data and AI as solution area. Then we have Modern Workplace, and then we have Business Apps. And each of the solution area, we have got 3 levels. Fundamental, obviously the name suggests the foundational understanding of technology. Then the associate level, and then the expert level. Today we're talking about Azure Security Engineer. It's not mandatory to be certified for Azure Fundamental, but it's good to be aware. If you're certified, it'll be good for you to move on to the associate level. And similarly, you can see we have exams under Modern Workplace and Business App theme. An overview of the exam and the role-based exam. Each of the exam would have around 40 to 60 questions. Some questions will be for more than 1 point. There is no negative marking. So my recommendation to you would be to attempt all questions. In case you are not certain of for a choice and you are moving around the options, you could mark that question as for review. You complete the set of questions and then you can come back to that specific question. You should plan for around 180 minutes. 30 minutes would be for the pre-work and post-exam work. 150 minutes to answer your questions. There will be more than multiple choice questions. You would have questions like hot area, drag and drop, build a list, and you also will get case studies. I'm sure most of you have gone through Microsoft exams. So in a case study, we talk about an organization. We'll share the business requirement and the technical requirement, and there will be a set of questions for that case study. my recommendation that you should not spend a lot of time reading the text in the case study. Start by looking at the question and then go into the respective section in the case study. That way you can optimize your time. You may get lab-based activities as well. So in a performance-based test within the exam, we are trying to gauge the skill of the attendee, their expertise on Azure portal and the way they have worked on configurations on Azure portal. So you may get 2 labs. Each lab may have 7 to 9 tasks. And as you complete the task, you have to mark it as complete and then move on to the next task. For the Azure security exam, let's look at the job description for that role. The person who would be sitting for this exam, that person is a key member in a cloud transformation journey for an enterprise. They are not individuals, they will be a part of the team. They would be maintaining not the on-premise security posture, they would also look at deployments and maintaining security configurations in the cloud. So they would look at end-to-end infrastructure management. They need to have experience in operating system, virtualization, cloud infra, storage structures, and networking. And they would have a lot of responsibilities around data protection, application protection, identity and access management, and so on. So for the Azure Security Engineer Associate exam, the learning path for that exam or the exam prep series that we're talking about, it'll have 4 key modules: identity and access, security operations, platform protection, data and application. I've called out a link for learning path. And I've also called out the Learn portal path. I will always recommend you to start your Microsoft service learning through microsoft.com/learn. If you're preparing for another exam or you are going deep in a specific service, be it an M365 portfolio or in Azure, start with Learn. And there are hands-on labs as well. So you could choose a learning path, you could select a role, you can select a level, and then go through the modules. I'll show you a quick sneak preview of that portal. The 4 modules that I have called out, each module has a weightage. So you could pace your learning based on the weightage. You could start by going with the identity and access module, which has around 25% of weightage, and then go to platform protection, which has around 40%, then go to security operation, which is around 20%, and then last module is around securing data and application, which is around 35%. So based on the weightage, you should expect the number of questions in the exam for it. Let's do one level down on the modules and let's look at the lesson by lesson agenda in the module. So day 1, which is today, we are talking about identity and access. So we'll start by talking about Azure Active Directory. And in that specifically talking about privilege identity management. Then we'll talk about Key Vault. How do you configure it? How do you manage it? Then we look at Azure AD. How would you configure it for workloads, be it on-prem, SaaS apps, or how would you onboard a custom app? So we'll cover that. How would you manage subscriptions and how would you configure security around subscriptions? Module 2 is around implementing platform protection. So we'll cover things like cloud security. How would you build a network? How would you secure a network? How would you implement host security? How would you look at implementing security announcements, and then subscription security. Module 3 would be around how would you secure data and applications, things like security policies for data, encryption, application security, and how would you implement security for application lifecycle. Module 4 is around managing security operations. So we'll look at Security Center. How would you configure security policies in that? Security alerts. How would you configure security baseline? So with that, let me show you a quick view of the Learn portal. So we will look at the Microsoft.com/learn portal first. As I was saying, you could browse the path. You could select a role, and let's say I want to look at security engineer. role, you could see there are 32 modules, and you could go deep into each of the modules. And you can also select the level, you could also select the type. If you see on the main page of this Microsoft.com/learn portal, I'll just go one level up again. You could get options around hands-on labs as well. So a good amount of content on the Learn portal. On the Microsoft.com/certification portal, you could pick up a job role and then based on that get the required certification path. That's the same link I had shown in the slide. So let's now get started with module 1, which is identity and access. And I'll start by presenting that slide. So we will go through a series of slides, and then for each of the lesson we will do a demo. Identity and access lesson will have 4 agenda items, starting with Azure AD PIM, then going to Key Vault, then configuring Azure AD for workloads and subscription, and the last bit would be around how would you secure your Azure subscription. One important thing, this is an exam prep series module, so we'll not go deep into a service, but the idea is to give you a head start so that you can prepare well for the exam. And the whole content, the 4 module series content, is tailored around the exam. If you're looking at content specific to Azure AD and going deep into all aspects of Azure AD, I would suggest you to start with the Microsoft.com/learn portal. So we'll go with the first bullet, which is Azure AD PIM. We know that gone are those days where the physical boundary was the perimeter defense to keep the attackers out. So it was like your data or access coming from outside your firewall was always treated as hostile, while inside the firewall you would treat it like a trusted environment. Gone are those days now, because what we have seen that if there is a bad actor in an organization or some password has got leaked, a horizontal attack can happen within the corporate network as well, which can then create huge issues, data leak issues in the environment. So perimeter defense is no longer the focus of security professional. Modern organizations have to support access to data and services as evenly as from inside as well as from outside. So for that, we talk about zero trust model. So we'll start by talking about that, and then we'll move on to identity management and identity governance. Is zero trust model a service? Not really. Zero trust model was introduced by analyst firm Forrester Research. What ZTM states, it says never to assume trust, but instead to continually validate trust. When users, devices, and data all reside inside the organization firewall, they are assumed to be in the same level as when the traffic is coming from outside the corporate firewall. So what zero trust model would rely on? It will rely on verifiable user and device trust claim to grant access to organization resources. So no longer is trust assumed based on the location inside an organization's parameter. And for trust determination, the components you would look at would be identity provider, device directory, policy evaluation service, and access proxy. How would you implement a zero trust model? So migrating to a zero trust security model provides for a simultaneously improvement of security over conventional network-based approaches, and to better enable users when they need access. So you would require signals so that you can make informed decisions, policies to make access decisions, and then enforcement capabilities to implement those decisions effectively. Those enforcements could be like read-only access to a SaaS app, or things like remediating compromised password by enforcing self-password reset. In Microsoft portfolio, we talk about Azure Active Directory that can enable you to enable ZTM or Zero Trust Model. It's a cloud-based identity and access management service which helps your employees to get seamless single sign-on and access to resources that could be on-prem or on cloud or on Microsoft Cloud. Those cloud apps could be SaaS apps or on third-party clouds, and you could bring in your own device. You can access the application through a trusted location and from a trusted device. So Azure Active Directory allows to give you a secured control plane by looking at identity as the control plane and giving secured access to resources. In Azure AD portfolio, we talk about Azure AD Privilege Identity Management. It's a service that enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. So you would go with the least privileged model, and a user, when he or she needs to carry out an operation, which is a privileged operation on an Azure AD connected workload, be it on-prem app, be it a cloud SaaS app, or be it a Microsoft app like Office 365, they would go through a privileged identity management model. So it will allow you to do just-in-time access, time-bound access, and you can enforce approvals if you want to make sure that an admin comes into picture or a business user comes into a picture when you are requesting this kind of privileged access. Important thing I want to highlight, PIM or the Azure AD Privileged Identity Management is available in Azure AD Premium Plan 2, or it's part of EMS Suite E5 or M365 E5. This could be an exam question as well, and that's why I've called it out. You could get it in either of the three option models. If you're starting with a learning path, you could also start with a trial and then continue your learning and then go with the respective license option. Azure AD in general is available as Azure AD Free, Azure AD for Office 365 apps, Azure AD Premium Plan 1, Azure AD Premium Plan 2. Premium Plan 2 covers identity governance, privileged identity management. Now, how do you configure PIM? An important tip here, it's a very important step. The person who configures or uses PIM for the first time, that person automatically gets assigned two roles: security administrator and privilege role administrator role. And these privilege role administrators can only manage Azure AD Directory role assignments. So to start using PIM, you need to activate PIM. Once the licenses are assigned, you activate that, and then you give a consent to use that as a service. So we'll go through those initial onboarding models, and then I will do a set of demos to go through the whole workflow process and how do you work on PIM as a PIM administrator. So the person who would access the portal once the licenses are assigned to activate PIM, they will start with Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management resource. Once they launch it for the first time, they need to, he or she needs to do a consent to PIM. It will go through identity verification process for that user. And once the consent is done, the status check completed message would show up for that particular PIM administrator. Then this administrator can do actions like activating a role, assigning roles. So to activate a role with PIM enabled, access to privileged operations must be activated. You would do it through the My Roles tab, and we will do that in the demo also. To activate, when you activate, if there is no approval workflow, it gets activated and the user gets added to the list of active roles. After defining PIM, you can start then adding user to those roles. Can I monitor the status of the request? Yes, you can do that too. You will go to the Azure AD PIM my request section, and then you will look at the request status. I can also review the audit history. You could also export these audit logs to a third-party SIEM, or you could use the Azure SIEM, which is Sentinel, or you could always look at the audit logs in the Azure portal. So let's start by now connecting to the Azure portal, and I'll show you some demos. Okay, so the first demo I want to show you is around the role assignment. So I'm logged in as Cloud Admin, and with Cloud Admin, I want to show it to you that how this person got assigned the default roles. So under Azure AD roles, if I go to roles and I go to active roles, my roles and then active roles, I can see the two roles assigned to this user, which are the privilege role admin and the security admin role. Now I will show you another thing which is around licensing. So I prefer using the search tab, but you could always go to home tabs or resources and Azure Active Directory. So I'm under Azure Active Directory, and we'll look at the licensing option. And within that, if you are starting your own learning, you can start with a free trial. In my tenant, I have the EMS E5. You could see that in my all products section, I have EMS E5 license assigned. And under licensed features, you could see the list of features that are available for this resource. So you could see the kind of features I can activate and use per user. So let's go back to the PIM service. I'll go back to Home tab and I'll go to Azure AD PIM. Now let's do a role assignment. Let's pick up a role. So I'll go to Azure AD roles, and I'm a privilege admin now, a privilege identity management admin. So I'm going to look at a role and I will assign a user to that role, and we'll simulate that workflow. So I'm going to click on, let's look at billing administrator role. And in that, let's do a member assignment. So I'm going to add a member. Let's choose Megan. And once I click on select, you would see there are membership settings like assignment type as eligible, which could be a permanently eligible, or I can just say active and specify the justification why I'm putting as permanently assigned at active. So for the purpose of demo, I'll just say eligible, and I'll say the start time and assignment end time. I'll click on save and I'll click on add. So what I just did, I added Megan as a billing admin. Now Megan has to go to the Azure AD PIM service and has to complete the activation process, because I have given a start time and end time, and I've marked her as eligible, not permanently assigned. So we log in as Megan. You can see I'm logged in as Megan now. I'll go to Azure AD PIM. I'll go to my roles under task, and you can see billing admin available as direct assignment with an end time. I need to activate this. So I'll say activate. The start time is given, and I'll mention this is for my day-to-day work, and I'll click on activate. So it will go through these stages 1, 2, and 3. So once the stage 3 is complete, we'll see the sign out button, and you should sign out this user, or the user should sign out, and within 10 minutes the permissions would be replicated, valid for this duration that was selected. So we will let this happen, and in the meantime I'll show you another demo. So we'll just we did an eligible assignment. We'll pick another user and do a direct assignment. I want to show you that experience as well. So we'll go to Cloud admin as a user, we'll go to PIM service, we'll go to Azure AD roles, and we'll pick the billing admin role again. And let's add another user. Let's add Adele. So we'll add Adele as a permanently assigned. So I can say active, and she is required to do an activity, and just say save, and I'll click on add. I want to show you the experience as well for that. So we looked at that user being assigned as active, and the user will have active role. And there was a third experience, so I will say add member. I'll pick another user. Let's pick up Alex this time, and I'll say select, and I'll keep it as eligible but permanently eligible. And this time you see the experience. This person will have membership as direct and permanent, and when you log in as Alex, you just need to go through the activation process. So 3 experiences I showed about. Now let's do a demo around access reviews. I'm still logged in as the PIM admin, and we'll go to roles and we'll click on access review. We want to do an access review, so we'll click on new. We'll give it a name as demo access review, and I'll specify a start date. The frequency, you could say weekly, monthly, quarterly, and put an end date, and the scope. And you can do a review of a privileged role, let's say billing admin in this case. And then you could do a review for a specific set of you can do a self review as well. And this we can do a review of whether Adel, Alex, they have been accessing this role or not. I want to show you some advanced settings. So if you see, there is an option which says require reason on approval. It's enabled. So this will kick off the approval workflow, as I was talking about in the slide. And you could turn it on, off, and you can do show recommendations, mail notifications, and reminders. So click on start and execute the access review. You could do it one time. You could also do it periodically. So that's a quick demo on access reviews. So with that, we will look at the last part of the demo, which is audit history. So my audit history tab under activity will give you a view of the audit actions. So who was the requester, action, the target, the subject. You could do filters, you could put audit types. We said eligible, so, and we say apply, so you could see the respective audit logs, and you can always export these logs to your SIM, or you can do it on Sentinel. So with that, we are done with the PIM demo. We will now go back to our slide for lesson 2. So lesson 2 is about configuring and managing Azure Key Vault, and we'll go through some onboarding processes. As I said, it's not a deep dive on Key Vault, but it is tailored around the exam. What's Key Vault? Let's start with that. It's a software implementation of HSM, which is Hardware Security Module. It helps you solve problems like secret management, where you could securely store and enforce tight control access to tokens, passwords, API keys, secrets. You could do key management, which is like make a key or create a key, control the encryption key which are used to encrypt your data. Those encryption keys could be for your storage account or for your Azure SQL or SQL Managed instance. And another thing with Key Vault, we use Key Vault for certificate management as well, that it lets you easily provision, manage, and deploy both public and private TLS SSL certificates for use with Azure or your internal connected resources, so that you don't end up in these kind of issues which are shown in the screenshot. So the stores, this whole certificate management process helps you in the entire life cycle, and with partnership with the CA authorities, it gives you a robust solution. So Key Vault is designed to store configuration secrets for your server application. It's not intended to store your data belonging to your apps or users, and it shouldn't be used in the client side part of an app. So I'm calling out some recommendations. So if you look at the documentation, it says, and it's reflected in its performance characteristics, cost model, and the APIs. So user data should be stored in your sources like storage account, SQL database with TD enabled, and if you are using storage account with storage service encryption, and you use those secrets and store those secret encryption keys in Key Vault. That's the way you should look at it. Now, Key Vault has got two interfaces, and this is a very important section, especially for the exam. There are two interfaces, management plane and the data plane. Management plane is where you manage the Key Vault itself. Operations in this plane include creating and deleting key vaults, retrieving the Key Vault properties, and updating the access policies. So if a user is requesting or using the management plane, the authentication will happen through Azure AD. Authorization will happen through role-based access control. This is very important. So when you are looking at controlling access, you will need to onboard the right role so that only a specific or the authorized person can do activities like managing key secrets and certificates. So role-based access control is for authorization. Data plane. Data plane is where you work with the data stored in a Key Vault. You can add, delete, and modify keys, secrets, and certificates from here. Authentication through Azure AD. Authorization through Key Vault access policies. And it's something you may get as a lab task. So I'll show you that in the demo. So to access a Key Vault in either plane, management or data, the caller should have proper authentication through Azure AD, and then the right authorization model, right RBAC if it's coming on management plane, he or she should be a part of the access policy so that they can access the data plane. Let's look at the certificate management part. The Key Vault certificates support provides management for X509 certificate. It enables a certificate owner to create a certificate through the wizard. So you could follow a Key Vault certification process. You could also import an existing certificate, and it includes both self-signed as well as CA-generated certificate as an option. A Key Vault certificate owner would implement secure storage and management of X509 certificates without interaction with private key material. All of it is audited. You can also get notifications. You can also onboard automatic renewal of certificates with selected issuers. So we have some partner certificate providers and CA where you could get into the automatic renewal thing as well. And we have something called as policy-based lifecycle management. So a certificate policy would contain information like how to create, how to manage the Key Vault certificate lifecycle. And let's say when a certificate with private key is imported in Key Vault, a default policy will be created by reading the X509 certificate. So when a Key Vault certificate is created from scratch, a policy gets applied. This policy will tell how to create a Key Vault certificate version or the next Key Vault certificate version. So after a policy has been established, it's not required to do this for successive create operations. It's only one instance of a policy for all the versions of Key Vault certificate. Now let's look at a scenario where you are working on transferring HSM protected keys. A tip, this could be something you may get as an exam question. Maybe you're working on a migration scenario. A key was stored in an on-prem HSM. How would you transfer the HSM protected key? So it's all documented in this link. You could follow a process like you have to start with an offline workstation to generate a key, and using an offline workstation, it will reduce the attack surface. The key, when you generate from this offline workstation, is encrypted with this key exchange key, which is KEK, which stays encrypted until it is transferred to Azure Key Vault HSM. So only the encrypted version of your key leaves your offline workstation. You have tool sets that sets property on your tenant key that binds your key to Key Vault. So after the Key Vault HSM receives that key and decrypts that, only these HSMs can use it. You cannot, your key cannot be exported. And this binding is enforced by the Thales HSMs. That's the implementation we have in Azure Key Vault. It's a software implementation of that. So the KEK that encrypts your key is generated inside the Key Vault HSM, and it's not exportable. So HSM would enforce that there can be no clear version of KEK outside the HSM. The whole process that I just spoke about, it's available on this link. Can I upload a secret on the portal through a GUI or through PowerShell? What's the way for it? You could use PowerShell. I've copy pasted a snapshot of it. You could use the PowerShell script, or you could do it through the portal as well. After you have a key vault, you can start using it to store keys and secrets. Your application no longer needs to persist your keys or secrets, but can request them when they need it from the vault. And that operation could be through a manual process, which is like you go to the portal and request for it, you do a copy paste, or you do through REST API programmatically, or through automation scripts. So now let's do a set of demos. I'm going to connect my lab or my lab tenant. So I'm presenting my Azure portal, and we will start by going to my specific subscription for this activity. I'll connect to my Azure subscription. I will go to the specific resource group, and I'll show you first how do you go about creating the Key Vault resource. So I'm under the resource group AZ500 mod 1. I'll click on add. I will do a search for the Key Vault resource, and I'll click on create. So once the wizard opens up, I will specify the Key Vault name. I'll say Key Vault PSRG2 and the region. I will select UK South. The pricing tier, standard or premium. So you could see premium includes the support for HSM backed keys, and then you would specify the purge protection setting and whether enable or disable, and the retention period. I'll say review and create, and once it goes through validation, I'll say create. So I let this happen. In the meantime, I'll show you the key vault that I had created, and we'll do quick activities. So we'll go to the secrets tab. I'll start by overview pane first. So we'll look at the overview pane, and it gives you a summary of the total number of requests, the DNS name for your Key Vault resource. So you could look at then the keys and start using the settings tab. You could store your encryption key by using the portal or through PowerShell, and you can store your secrets under the secret tab. Let's say I'll say manual or certificate. I'll just say manual. I'll say Windows admin and a password, and I can put an activation date and an expiration date. I'll say create, and likewise I can do certificate. I was speaking about access policies. If you remember, access policy was for data plane. So under access policies, you would create an access policy, and you will pick up a template. So you could say key, secret, and certificate management. You can look at the respective permissions, or you could just go by selecting the respective key permissions or secret permissions and certificate permissions. You add the user, the application, authorize application, and then click on add. So I've already added my account with an access policy, and this user Rohit Gulati has access for keys to do get list update. For secrets, I've got 7 actions. For certificate management, I've got 15 permission actions. And I can enable access to VM deployment, ARM template deployment, or disk encryption. So all of this is audited, logged. You could look at the logs, and you can also push alerts, matrices, diagnostic settings to log analytics. So that was a quick demo on Key Vault. Let's go back to the slide deck. Now let's look at lesson 3, which is about how do you configure Azure AD for your workloads and subscription. In this, we will talk about various Azure AD specific points like how do you configure multi-factor, how do you configure conditional access policies, what's an Azure AD Connect tool, so I'll talk about that. Where it will come into picture, what's hybrid authentication, and we'll do other demos around configuring authentication methods as well as app registrations. So let's start with multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication is a service that adds another extra security layer to protect your identity. So it will ensure that even if the user's password is leaked, or there is another enforcement in action, which could be through a fingerprint, it could be phone, or it could be Windows Hello if you have used Windows 10 Hello. So single factor authentication can add risk. It's not sufficient to secure an environment. An MFA would ensure that an attacker does not have access even if the password is leaked. So Azure provides a service called multi-factor authentication. We acquired a company a few years ago called PhoneFactor, and now it's part of our portfolio. It enables two-step verification solution. It will help you safeguard access to data and application while it meets the user demand for single sign-on. So you could get multi-factor authentication done through a phone call, a one-time password, text message, or an app password. So there are multiple options for authentication. So in concept, multi-factor or the time-bound elevation model, why we talk about this, there are 3 elements that are key when it is around successful authentication. Something you know, which could be your password or security question answer, something you possess, which could be your mobile app or token device, or something you are, which could be like your biometric property on your fingerprint or Windows Hello. Azure MFA, as I said, it's part of offerings like Azure AD Premium License, which could be an Azure MFA service for the cloud or an MFA server. Things like when you want to integrate it with your VPN solution, you could use MFA server, or some legacy environment where you cannot connect to Azure AD MFA cloud service. So then you will go with MFA server as an option. You also get it as a part of multi-factor authentication for Office 365. As well as you get it for global admins of Azure AD. Now let's look at how and what is multi-factor authentication. So if you look at this diagram, it talks about a user bringing in or accessing the environment from a device, which could be a smartphone or a tablet, or it could be a personal device, based on the parameters that has been set by the admin. Things like user group membership, location, application, or if the risk governance is in place, Azure Active Directory will enforce an action. So remember I spoke about signal decisions and enforcement. So Azure Active Conditional Access would ensure that user, once they are trying to access an environment, they would go through this process of verification. If the user is coming from an unknown location, the user may be prompted for MFA if that's the policy. If the user is connecting from a specific secure boundary, or an IP range which is outside the corporate network, then you could prompt a user to punch in the multi-factor authentication. There are various service options, as I said: MFA cloud service, MFA server. In this example, it talks about scenarios with RDS on-prem or VPN appliances on-prem that could connect to MFA server. How would you configure MFA for application? You do that through conditional access, and we will be doing this in the demo. I will walk you through how to configure multi-factor authentication. To set that up, you need to be a global admin for the Azure AD tenant. You will go to conditional access pane. You will then configure policies. You would find there are some built-in policies, and then there are options to create new policies. We also have an option to test a policy. So planning is required so that you don't mess up configuring conditions. Conditional access can also be a change to your enterprise if the enterprise is not using such kind of controls in the past. So proper planning with admin is important when it is conditional access. You could also configure Azure MFA for passwords. You go for that, you go to Azure Active Directory Blade, you would go to multi-factor authentication under users, and you configure the app password. Now let's look at Azure AD users and groups. In Azure AD, when you look at users and groups, these users and groups could be cloud identities, like those objects were created directly in Azure AD. Those could be dir-sync or directory synced entities. Like in a hybrid authentication model, an enterprise has on-prem Active Directory. You used a tool to sync the objects to cloud. Those objects would show up as synced objects. And the third category is guest users, which could be like your business-to-business partners. Maybe there are Contoso and Fabricam business partners. Contoso has employees, and there is an app that's being used by Fabricam employees as well. So the Contoso employees can invite Fabricam as guest, and they can do B2B collaboration. There's another set of guest users, which is B2C, the business to consumer. Like you may want to onboard social identities. Let's say if you are a retailer and you are trying to build an app, maybe you are onboarding loyalty points, and you may want your customers to bring in their own identity. So you could onboard the B2C model for your retail app. You could do this activity through Portal or through PowerShell. How would the user look like? So if you go to Azure AD users pane, you would find there is a source column. If you see the source type as Windows Server AD, that means a user was a directory synced. If you see a source type as Azure Active Directory, that means the user was cloud synced. And if you see the username aliases, we have a guest user called Bert with hotmail.com ID, which is a social ID, and then we have a business to business user as guest, and that user is available as a guest object in Azure Active Directory. That's on the user side. Let's look at the groups. So a group would help you organize your users to make your permission management easy. Folks who have been working on Active Directory or Windows Active Directory, they know that you could set up security groups, distribution groups, and then you could configure security groups and tag ACLs to that. So there are two types of groups in Azure AD World as well: security group and distribution groups. You can configure these groups through PowerShell or through Portal. In PowerShell, you would use a command like new-Azure AD group command. And then you can do membership assignment through Portal, which is directly assigned, or you could do dynamic assignment. What's dynamic assignment? That you will define a condition. Let's say you could say all employees in the finance department could be a condition. Location could be a condition. So I'll show you this in a demo. Is it beneficial in any way? Yes, it is. So let's say if you have a scenario where you want to implement joiner, mover, lever scenario, this could be very handy. You may want to onboard that in a way that the user, if he or she moves from one department to another department, the dynamic group membership of that user updates the application profile, Windows ACL permissions as well. So it's an important concept. And I spoke about one use case, joiner, mover, leaver scenario. On the portal, it'll look like this. Under groups pane, you will go to all groups, and then you look at synced groups, or you could create groups and look at the assignment type. So we'll do this in the demo as well. Let's look at Azure AD Connect tool. So Azure AD Connect tool is a free tool that allows you to synchronize your identity objects from on-prem directory to Azure Active Directory. So it could provide a common identity for your users who are using Office 365, line of business apps, mobile apps, SaaS apps. So a common identity comes into play. User gets single sign-on, seamless sign-on to all the types of apps, and it enables a hybrid environment. Folks who have worked with tools like MEM or FEM or ILM, they know the directory sync concept. So it uses the same concept. It has components like sync services, health monitoring. It supports federated authentication through ADFS or cloud authentication through password hash sync or pass-through authentication. What does that mean? So if you look at this diagram, it talks about an on-prem Active Directory. You have enabled Azure AD Connect Sync by installing Azure AD Connect tool on-prem, and the objects were synced to Azure AD, and then you could enable the authentication model, be it federated through ADFS or cloud authentication through password hash sync, where you are syncing hash of the password to Azure AD, or pass-through authentication, where you would install a pass-through agent on your on-prem domain controller, and that agent facilitates the authentication model. So this agent would have outbound 443 access only and supports cloud-based authentication. So you could choose either federated auth or one of the cloud authentication model as a part of Azure AD Connect installation. Now in Azure AD, we did a demo of privileged identity access management earlier. We looked at Azure AD roles. You might have seen there are so many roles available as built-in, and there are each role will have roles like owner, contributor, or reader. You can also follow that same model of member assignment, which I showed you in the demo. You could add member. If it's a privileged role and if you have enabled PIN, you could go through that whole workflow, whole assignment process, workflow process, and elevated just-in-time access. You could also make custom roles. To make a Azure AD custom role, each role is like a JSON file. So you would use the JSON file, you would take an existing role, look at the various attributes like name, ID, description, modify that, and then look at the actions. You would then look at allowable permissions, you would then look at denied permissions, you would then look at the scope. So where you would make these custom roles, maybe let's say you have to enable level 1 help desk, level 2 help desk. For in those kind of scenarios, you would create custom roles. I just gave one example, but there could be many more. And you could go about enabling this in your enterprise by going through JSON file, executing it through PowerShell. So when you configure the authentication method, Microsoft highly recommends that administrators enable user to select more than the minimum required number of authentication methods, so that in case they do not have access to one method, there is another option available for them to go for. So there are this is a table mentioned on the slide. I won't go line by line, but it gives you a view. Let's say, for example, the authentication method has password, so they have MFA as well as an option to do self-service password reset. So it's an important concept, and we will do a set of demos also where I'll talk about the self-service portal and talk about how you could onboard that in your environment. So how would you configure these authentication methods with Azure AD? You would look at configuring password, security questions, email addresses, authenticator app. You could also bring in the hardware token if you have like RSAs or Duo. We've also come out with a partnership and the FIDO Alliance. So if you have heard of Ubico, you could also bring those in the environment. And then the mobile phone and the app password. So we'll do this in the demo section where I'll walk you through this process. So let's say you're building an application and you would be working on using Azure AD as your IAM layer. So you have to follow an app registration model. So Microsoft Identity Platform is an evolution of Azure AD Identity Service and Developer Platform. So it will allow developers to build applications that sign in Microsoft identities so that you can get tokens to call Graph and other Microsoft APIs. So it's a fully featured platform. And it has open source libraries. It allows you to do application registration and configurations, and all of it is very well documented. So if you look at the platform, we support standard protocols like OAuth and OpenID Connect. So in this diagram, I'm going to talk you through the various layers. So you could see that we have got support for AMSAL, which is Microsoft Authentication Library, or the ADAL, which is the Azure Active Directory Authentication Library. So we have both version 1 endpoints as well as version 2 endpoints, and these are the various layers. So you could go through ADAL or AMSAL way, and I'll show you a demo. How do you do app registration? How do you onboard an app? How do you configure the HTTP path for it in the Azure AD pane? So any application that outsources authentication to Azure AD, you have to register it, as I was explaining, so that it tells Azure AD about your application, like the URL, where it is located, where to send the reply for the authentication. So when the authentication doesn't happen, where it should respond back, and the URI to identify your application. So if you look at the diagram, the diagram talks about the various phases. So if you look at the step number one is about requesting token for an application. Then the authentication process kicks in. It goes to the authorization endpoint. Once there is a consent, the consent is given back to the user. And then in the provisioning process, it creates a service principal from application, and then it returns the token back to the user. So this is just a example. What is a service principal? So Azure has a notion of service principal like a service account. So in Windows and Linux world, you might have been creating service accounts. So in Azure, we talk about service principal. So these accounts are frequently used to run let's say a specific scheduled task or web app pool or even a SQL server. So let's do a quick demo now. And let's look at various options in the Azure AD plane. I will start by showing you a demo for how to go about installing the Azure AD Connect tool. So let's start with that. Okay, so I'm presenting my Azure subscription, and I'm under Azure Active Directory Service, and I've selected Azure AD Connect tab. You could see we have a download button available. So it's, as I said, it's a free tool. You will have a member server on-prem, which could be a VM or it could be a physical box. Depending upon the size of organization, you could choose to deploy it along with the SQL server. Let's say if you have more than 50,000 objects, you may want to go with a dedicated SQL server or an existing SQL server. If it's a small or mid-sized organization, you can go with a local ExpressDB install. And another important thing, there's a question that keeps on coming to me, like how do I make Azure AD Connect highly available? We talk about Azure AD Connect installation in active standby mode. So you will have your active Azure AD Connect install, and then you will have a standby install. In case something goes bad, we have a health monitoring option. If something goes bad, let's say your site has gone down, you could activate your standby as your primary connect tool. So let's go kick on. Let's go with the installation process. Prerequisite, is there any other prerequisite on the Windows operating system side? That there are some prerequisite, but on the configuration side, obviously it is a sync engine tool, so it needs the right permissions on both sides. Also, when you get a tenant from Microsoft, you would get a tenant like something.onmicrosoft.com. That's not your domain. That's something that Microsoft gave you as a tenant ID. You need to verify your domain. In this case, you can see I have a tenant called as contoso-connect.com, and it's marked as verified. How would you verify a domain? Verification means you're saying that I have ownership to this domain, and you do that through DNS records. You would create a TXT record, and then you will verify the ownership of it by adding a custom domain. So that's what has been done. It's verified, and now we need to set the right permissions. So on both sides, on the Azure AD side, I have a global admin account. In this case, I'll use administrator admin account. On-prem side, I always recommend creating a new account. That way you can review, audit as well. So let's start with the installation. So I'll download the binary on a machine. I'll kick off the install. I'm going to go with the Express install. You could always choose the customize option. It's a demo, so we'll go with the local Express DB install. So you could see it gave me an option to select the components. I could select existing SQL Server, existing SQL service account, any custom installation location. I'll go with the default setting. You could see it's installing the local DB SQL Express. Alright, now it is giving me a user sign-in page. So pass-through authentication, where we do a password, where the authentication is passed through to the on-prem Active Domain controller to be validated. It's a cloud authentication model only, but you have an agent that supports the authentication process, and we call it as a PTA agent. You could always do password sync, which is the default selection here, where the hash of the password is synced to Azure AD. Or you can go to federated authentication with ADFS, where users are redirected to their on-prem Active Directory ADFS instance to sign in. Or you could go with the last option, which is do not configure. So we'll go with the default selection, which is password sync. We'll go with connecting the Azure AD instance. So the admin credential, and now let's connect to the on-prem Active Directory. Contoso-connect.com is my directory. As I mentioned to you, I will be creating a new account. It will be a dedicated service account, you need to you could use this for your auditing as well. That's what would be our recommendation as for it. Okay, so you could see this verification has happened. Now we will connect to our forest. It'll give us the default user principal name. If you need to specify a different attribute for Azure AD user username, you could specify here by selecting the drop down. Now this option gives us an opportunity to do a filter. So if I don't want all my OUs to be synced, I could just go to sync selected domains and OUs. I can then select a specific OU. In my case, I will uncheck contoso-connect.com root, and I will only select the employees OU. I'll just show you what's there in the employees OU in a bit. So I've selected the employees OU, and now let me launch my AD users and computer snap-in. And this is my employees OU. You could see we have got a bunch of users. I've got some 5 test users, user 1 to 5. So we will use that as well for the sync demo. The next would be like if you have multiple directories or you want to use other attributes to uniquely identify users, you can do that. Let's say you want to use mail attribute, you could select that too. And you need to also select the source anchor. So I am saying let Azure manage the source anchor for me, and I'm going with the default selection. So if I want to filter users, I can do that too. For pilot deployment, you could do that. You could filter the users in some ways based on group membership, but in production environment, I won't recommend that. So you could go with synchronize all users and devices within that OU that you have selected in the filter. The last is the optional feature pane. You could see there are more options like password write back. That way, in case the user does a self-service password reset and cloud supports the process, the password can be written back to on-prem. There are other options like group write back, device write back, and stuff like that. For this demo, let's select the password write back. And this would enable password synchronization both ways. So once the SSPR activity kicks in, the self-service password kicks in, the password will be synced back to the cloud. So the steps are done. I'll just click on install and the configuration process has kicked in. So we'll give it a few seconds and it should show up the installation, and you could see it's giving me a message saying AD recycle bin was not enabled, but that's just a warning, and I'll just click on exit. Now let's look at on the Azure AD side, on the portal, what's the experience. So let me log in as the global admin, and I'll go to Azure Active Directory and I'll connect to the users pane. So in my demo, I am showing you cloud identities, but let me show you the synced identities. So if I say user, these are the objects that are synced from on-prem and the source type as Windows Server AD. So this is a quick demo on hybrid sync, the sync directory sync objects. You could also look at, there's an option to invite a guest user, which could be like through invite individual user or a bulk request. Let's say I want to invite Chris Green from Contoso. I can just say chris.green@contoso.com, and I will then send an invitation. So B2B, B2C models is the guest-based model. In this, I'm inviting a B2B user, and I've just put in a invitation request. And once the user accepts my request, the user will become a guest object, and it will be activated. So the source type will show up once the user accepts the request. Okay, there was one more thing I wanted to show you. I could obviously do the password reset activity directly, but I spoke about multi-factor authentication in my slides, so you could enable multi-factor authentication process through the user selection pane. Now let's look at groups. I spoke about synced groups and cloud groups. So you could see the source type as Windows Server AD. These are synced groups from on-prem. I can now create a cloud group, and I'll quickly show you the demo for membership type. So let's say dynamic user, security group. I'll just say demo sec1, and the dynamic query. So you could pick up a expression or a property. You could select, let's say, country equals UK or United Kingdom, and you just add an expression. So that's a quick condition. You can have multiple conditions as well. So you can enable another property like country, and then maybe a department or You could also say postal code or state. So you could have multiple conditions in a dynamic group. There was another setting that came up when I was specifying the membership type, which is dynamic device. So let's say if you're implementing an MDM, mobile device management kind of a scenario, you may want to group your iOS devices in one group, Android devices in another group, and within that also you may want to add more conditions like iOS devices issued to senior manager and above. So you could do those dynamic conditions and then do targeted actions based on the dynamic device group selections. So we'll go back to the main page. Let's look at some more settings. So you have an option to do company branding. So you could enable in this demo, let's say for example I have the default logo. You could put in your company logo, company banner. You can do advanced settings, and you can also then put a language. You could add a language as well, and if you have a language file, you just go about importing the language file. Another setting, this is something, let's say if you want to allow your application developers to onboard apps for Azure AD authentication, you need to make sure the first toggle, which is user can register application, is set to yes. Then only they will be able to register their apps at Azure AD. On the admin portal, this is recommended. You would restrict access to admin portal and the LinkedIn account connection. So these are some basic settings under user settings. And under notification settings, like the summary, weekly reports, this is something you should configure as an admin. Exam question could be around doing a task of creating a dynamic group, or a very quick demo on where's the setting so that the user can onboard apps in Azure AD. So that registration toggle that I showed you under user settings, that's something you would look at. I want to show you another demo for the joiner movers and lever scenario. For that, let me just add my browser. Okay, so I am connected to my apps portal. Why I'm showing you this? Based on that group selection, I may get access to a specific set of apps. The new My Apps portal experience, I just want to log in and show that experience because that will resonate well. So once this portal opens up, you would see that there are Microsoft apps where I have permissions, and then there are all apps where I can select an app and request for access to an app. Based on the group membership, I see the respective app available in my landing page. So that's the joiner mover lever scenario. I thought I'll just show to you. Another experience, the idea is to bring you closer to the Office launcher experience. So the My Apps launcher experience would become similar to the Office launcher experience. And I can also do the service, the self-service password activity. So I can just go to my account and just want to quickly show you this experience. So I can go through my work account details, password, my sign in, my devices, my Office apps, my subscription. So I can go through these self-service activities with respect to my account. Okay, so old password, new password. So I can go through these experiences. So that's a quick demo on self-service password. Let's do now demo around onboarding an app. So Azure AD, as I said, can support single sign-on experiences for your line of business app, SaaS app, custom app that you're developing, mobile app, Microsoft apps like Office 365, Intune, Azure Portal. What do you need to do if you're building an app? You need to register an app. So how do you register that? You would go under app registrations and you follow the new registration pane. So It's pretty simple. You'll specify the display name. I'll say demo Contoso. You define the usage, like who can use this application or access this API, and then the URI path, web or client/native, and you click on register. I'll show you an existing one that I had registered. Just a quick on the settings on it. So demo 1234 was the display name for it, and you can see the app was registered. You can add a redirect URI, the application ID URI, and the app. This would be the client ID that will be generated for your app. On the endpoint side, I spoke about version 1 as well as version 2 endpoint. So you could get these details from the endpoint tab and embed it in your application. There are a lot of sample codes available, so you could use that to onboard your app, which is something you're developing. So I spoke about the apps that you're onboarding as a developer. What if I have line of business app that was built through a vendor, like based on form-based authentication or NTLM, or if you are using apps that are using header-based authentication, like let's say PeopleSoft. Are there any models to connect such apps to Azure already? Yes, we have a service component called Application Proxy, and it's a connector-driven model. So you would deploy this App Proxy connector on near to the application server within your data center. So the recommendation one is you should keep the connector as close as to the application server. Recommendation number 2. For high availability of connectors, you should have more than one connector within the data center, and you group them as connector groups. Recommendation 3, if you have multiple data centers, you would deploy these connector groups in all the data centers. So if you have an application that is there in data center 1, data center 2, data center 3, you will have connector groups with connectors in each of the data center. What if the connector goes down? You need not worry, because it's a stateless agent. You just go about installing the connector again, and as it registers, it will start polling the configuration. It will start polling the Azure AD App Proxy queue. So in a summary, Azure AD Application Proxy is a reverse proxy, but it also does protocol translation. So if you have legacy authentication apps like NTLM, form-based, header-based, it will convert these apps to modern authentication protocol. So it will give you a URI, which is more like a reverse proxy published URI with something.msproxy.net. You have an option to put a custom domain, which is your domain, like contoso-connect.com, the URI path for that. You specify the internal URI, external URI, and for zero trust model, you will make sure that you implement the same URI for convenience, both the same name under internal URL as well as the external URI, and put your custom domain for that. So custom domain names, I spoke about that. So I spoke about app registration, application proxy. Let's look at enterprise application piece now. So under the enterprise application pane, let's say if I have to onboard a SaaS app, let's say Box for single sign-on. So it's pretty simple. You just select the gallery app, and you can see on the left we have around 3,342 apps. You select the gallery app, just click on add, and you can just go through the tutorial. It's so simple to follow. And if you don't see your SaaS app, you could follow the non-gallery application process. Let's say if there is a SaaS app that understands SAML, you can follow that process. If your app understands SCIM protocol, which is for user provisioning automation, you can onboard that piece as well, and password-based single sign-on. So you can follow the steps for a non-gallery SaaS app. On-premise app, I mentioned about using application proxy. And the first one was applications that you're developing using the application registration option. So you could see in a summary, you can bring your existing line of business app. You can onboard the apps that you are developing. It could be a web app or a mobile app. And you can also pick up a gallery SaaS app, or you can look at a non-gallery SaaS app and then use protocol methods like SAML, SCIM, and offer single sign-on. There are scenarios we support with WebSocket authentication protocol with App Proxy. And let's say if there are header-based authentication options, we also have partnership with Ping Access. So you could bring in App Proxy plus Ping Access model also for header-based authentication app. Examples could be the PeopleSoft environment. Okay, so let's go back to the main section for just one last demo on conditional access. Let's look at the conditional access demo. So we will select, I use this search tab very often, as I said. I'll just say Azure AD conditional access. And I was telling you during the presentation that there are some baseline policies, but you could create a new policy. Let's say, I just say demo CA1, and you need to go about starting with assignments, conditions, then the access control. So let's say I will look at selected users. I could do it for guest and external users as well, or users and groups. So I can, let's say, select Adele for my CA policy. So I'm going to explicitly add Adele for the demo, and then scope it to the cloud app. I could say when Adele is accessing a specific cloud app which is registered on Azure AD, let's say Box, I can then put a condition which is like the sign-in risk condition, high, medium, low, or no risk, or the device platform, so the device state, whether it's a compliant device or and what kind of device platform it is. So I need to go about selecting that. Location, if it's a known location or trusted location, so you can go about selecting that. We also have client app option now. So if she's going to use the Box app through browser, is it a managed browser, or if she's not using a Tor browser, browser with rootkit, so you can go about configuring those controls. I'll just cancel this, and the last one I want to show you is device state. So once you have selected this condition, you go about defining the access control. So you want to grant access with multi-factor, hybrid AD joint device, required device to be marked as compliant. So you could select these actions, and you can go with all selected controls or one of the selected control as an option. And there's an option for session with conditional access app control. You could look at sign-in frequency and the persistent browser session. And you just go about in report only mode, you just enable the mode. So the best things about it is you could enable it in report only mode. So if there is a violation, there will be a notification. I mentioned during the presentation that it's always best to plan CA policies first. So let's say we have set up a policy and now you want to see what is the impact. So we have something called as a what if tool, and you could then see what's going to be the result. So I'll just say for Adele, for a cloud app, let's say Box again. Then I can select the location, device platform, and I can do what if. So what would be the effective conditional access policy on a user when this user does the sign-in process? Based on the conditions we have formulated in our environment through policies, if Adele signs in, what will be the experience? So that's something you can simulate here. Now some more configurations that you would do, like you could do named location configuration, which could be your MFA trusted IPs. Let's say you may want to say if people would access this particular app from your London office, don't do MFA, but if they are going beyond this IP range, which could be your Paris office or from their home, they should be prompted for MFA. So you can specify the new location. You could do custom controls. Terms of use is an interesting concept for data privacy and data compliance. You may want to onboard this process of accepting terms of use. Let's say an application, when it will be accessed by a European user for GDPR scenario, you could put a terms of use and then you can audit it as well. If you have an existing terms of use document, a PDF file, you can onboard that. You could type in the text. You can have multiple terms of use and scope it out to a set of users. I see this feature not being known to a lot of AD admins, Azure AD admins. So I would suggest, if you are an Azure AD license customer, please review this, use this. Will it be an exam question? Maybe not, but this is something you could enable. For VPN connectivity, you could onboard this through the Azure AD VPN certificate process, and then obviously there's an option to open a support request. You could look at the diagnostic section and for the troubleshooting section. On the Azure AD site, you also have audit logs, option to look at sign-in logs, provisioning logs, diagnostic settings, and you can do workbooks as well, and you can look at the usage and insights of your environment. So the Azure AD application activity, the ADFS application activity, and the authentication method activity. So you could do a review of your application, the successful sign-in, fail-in sign-in, and the success rate. And you can look at the success. I can go to the specific report also. So this is a usage report for Office 365 SharePoint Online. So with that, we are done with this part of the demo. Let's go to the slides, and we will do the next lesson. And we will do the next lesson. So this lesson is about configuring security for an Azure subscription. And we'll go through slides and some bullet points. So we'll talk about how do you configure an RBAC role. So we will do a quick demo around that. We'll look at how do you configure subscription and resources. How would you look at external accounts? We'll also do transferring of subscription demo, like how do you configure, let's say you want to transfer the billing ownership, how do you do that? So we'll cover that bit. And lastly, if you look at the API access, how do you manage API access? We'll also do some demo around resource lock, Azure policy, and then we'll conclude this particular lesson. So we'll now get to the slides and go to the first part of the agenda item. So we'll look at Azure RBAC. I spoke about RBAC and the default roles that are available. Azure RBAC allows you to go with the default roles or custom roles. It also allows you to put role-based access control at the root level, at the subscription level, at the resource group level, or at the resource level. Now, what's the root level? Let's do a double click on that through a diagram. So if you look at this diagram, when you would come to Microsoft and get a Azure contract, for your tenant, you will get an Azure AD tenant ID, which is a 25-digit GUID. Let's say it's contoso.onmicrosoft.com. By default, contoso.onmicrosoft.com becomes your root management group, which is the tenant ID and the root management group for your organization. Within that, you can go about creating multiple subscriptions. But if you look at that kind of a scenario, one root and underneath that you've created 100 subscriptions, it is very difficult to manage. We came out with this concept called scaffolding architecture and governance. So with that model, you could create sub-management groups. Those management groups could be based on, let's say, your geographical location, department, environment. So you could say Americas, Asia, Europe as the first layer. Then within that, you create another sub-management group, which could be Department A, Department B, Department C, and within that there could be another management group child, which could be production environment, dev environment, and then you can put your subscription in that child management group. What you're doing with this, you are effectively onboarding an hierarchy, but it also gives you an option to govern your model effectively. Governance in the sense, you could do role-based access control at the geographical management group, or at the department management group, or at your environment management group, which is like production or dev, or then within the environment management group, you could do it at the subscription level. Within the subscription, if you see in the diagram, there is something called resource group. So you could do role-based access at resource group or at the resource level. So effective governance process means you need to onboard this kind of a hierarchy. And then you can maintain 6 levels of management groups, and then you can move your subscriptions in the right hierarchy. Even if you are working with an existing customer, you could do this today as well. And it's a very well documented approach available on our architecture center. So you could go with built-in roles. You can make custom roles. I spoke about that in the previous slide. So we'll look at how would you now configure subscription and resource permissions. So this demo screenshot is like you are on the Azure portal. You can just go about adding subscriptions. If you are an enterprise admin, you need to have at least account owner permission so that you can create new Azure subscriptions. Once you have created the subscription, you can then define subscription owners, and those subscription owners can then log into their subscriptions and ensure that they have the right delegated roles assigned or the delegated permissions assigned to their team members. So you could follow that model and go about onboarding various roles in the enterprise setup. On the management side, in the users pane I showed you, you could easily identify the user as a directory synced user, or a cloud identity user, or a guest user. You could also use Azure Security Center. So it is a unified infrastructure security management system that will help you strengthen the security posture. You can also look at it as your tool for prohibiting shadow IT. So if there are shadow IT subscriptions, it can help you identify those shadow IT subscriptions. You can then bring your environment to compliance. It could be the main tool for your security admins. And by looking at the subscriptions labeled as not covered in that dashboard, you could bring them into partially or fully managed. A Security Center is available in free tier and standard tier. For doing actions on Security Center, you need to move your subscription to standard tier. Azure Policy here is a service in Azure that lets you create a compliance state. So you should look at like a platform that enables a desired state compliance for your model. So you could run or have different rules that can work on the resources so that your resources are compliant to your corporate standards and your SLAs. So Azure Policy will do an evaluation of your resources for non-compliance. And then let's say if you have a policy that allows maybe a certain size of VM to be there in your environment, and if there are certain VMs that are under that non-compliant, then it will give you an option to remediate. So with the right type of policy, existing resources can be brought into compliance. Let's look at an example. So this table talks about an example. In this example, you can see there is a policy to audit external accounts with owner permissions on a subscription. Then another policy to audit external accounts with write permission, and the policy for read permission. So if you have enabled that governance model and you have enabled that hierarchical model, you could then enforce the right policies, and we'll do a quick demo also in just a bit. So let's look at the next slide, which is around transferring and managing subscriptions. In a large organization, you may want to delegate some activities of a subscription. Like you may want to delegate billing management part of it. So you could then use the manage button or transfer subscription option, and you could then move the subscription to a specific user. That way you can work across in effective management. You can have ownership transferred to another owner or to an Azure AD tenant. So it's pretty simple process, and we'll do it through a demo. Now, managing API. So when you publish your API through Azure API management, it gives you a simple and easy way to secure access to those APIs. Now, what is an APIM? APIM is an Azure powered service that allows you to publish your on-premise APIs, Azure apps APIs, or the SaaS APIs through a single management plane, and you secure access to your APIs using subscription keys. So client application that need to consume these published API, they need to make a request via a valid subscription key. So when they would make a call, in their HTTP request, they have to supply the subscription key. And to get this subscription key or to access of this subscription key, they need to have a subscription. So a subscription is essentially a name container for a pair of subscription keys. So developers who need to consume the published APIs can get subscription. They don't need approval from API publishers. API publisher can also create subscription directly for API consumers. So API management supports mechanism for authentications like OAuth 2.0, client certificates, and IP whitelisting. So that's a way you could secure and manage your API access. So let's do a demo now. I'm going to connect my lab. I'm going to connect my lab, and we will look at the demo around Azure policies first. So we will connect to our Azure subscription, and we will look at specific settings. Okay, so we are into my Azure tenant, and I was talking about Azure policies. So we'll use the policy option. I use the search bar as I mentioned. So you can see in my environment, I've got 86% compliance. In the overview dashboard, it talks about the non-compliant initiatives, non-compliant policies, non-compliant resources. Now, I spoke about policies, but what's an initiative? Initiative, if you look at it, it's a simple way of grouping your policies. That way, you can effectively manage your environment. Let's say you are working with finance team, and you may want to look at giving them specific image sizes for deployment, specific regions for deployment. You may want to onboard some more security controls and policies. So you can group all these policies together and form an initiative. So let's do this demo. So we'll look at definitions. We'll go to the policy definition. If you look at the default view that has come in, it says the type as built-in, or I could just say custom. So if I say custom, right now I don't have any, but you could easily differentiate by using this filter. So we'll create a new policy definition. I'll give it a name. I'll say demo policy. I'll specify the location. I'll specify the subscription. I will pick up my subscription. I'll say select. I'll put a name, demo policy 1. And it's always good to give a description. And then you define a category. Now, what's a category? Category could be like the resource type. So if you see the expansion, it could be compute, batch, backup, automation. So that way you can easily identify what is this policy for. You could also look at templates that have been uploaded in GitHub. So there's a lot of contribution that happens in community as well. So you could look at the built-in policies, references, the contribution, the extension, the patterns, and let's look at samples. So samples could be for monitoring, network, policy initiative, resource group, and stuff like that. So you can pick up a sample policy definition from GitHub and then work on it. So if you look at the below text, it's a JSON text again, and there's a structure given to it, and you can then edit this and work through that. So you create a simple, I'm creating a demo policy for this, and I'll just say click on save. So now if I go to all types, I just say custom, it should show the policy that I just created. Previously, if you saw it, there was no custom policy. Now I'll show you a quick one. Let's pick up audit Windows VMs that do not have specified application installed policy, and we're auditing for a specific set, and we have given the parameter, so, and the application name. So you could look at the application like SQL Server. So there are some examples given, and this policy picks that. So if in this policy we have there's another one which is show audit results if from Windows VM that do not have the specified application installed. So there's this one policy. I can make it a part of an initiative. Now let's create an initiative definition. I'll just say demo IAM1. I'll say demo as a description. I'll put a category. I think I use a special character. Let me remove that. I'll put a category as compute, and I can select the custom policy I created, and I'll just say add. Oh, I think I did multiple ads, so I'll just say add, and I can say the other one, which is audit virtual machines without the discovery method, and I can click on save. So I have to specify the allowed location, and I'll just say save. So this initiative got created, and if you see, we can do a filter through initiative and the custom one that I have just created, which is demo IAM1. So you can group more than one policy under initiative, and then now you do assignments. So that's the next step. So under assignments, you would scope this out. So I'll say select scope first. So my scope is my subscription, which is my internal subscription, which is selected. Okay, and I can say assign initiative, and if I need to put an exclusion, the initiative definition, so I can say the demo one that I just created, and put a description. I can do policy enforcement and the assigned by field. So I'll just go about just canceling this, but I just wanted to show you the assignment part of it. So you create policy, put an initiative, do an assignment, and it starts doing the enforcement part of it. Now, blueprints, another concept. Blueprints is a capability where it enables you to do quick deployment of governed environments. So it could be a blueprint, a definition that is available from us as a template, from Microsoft as a template. So there are some blueprint definitions available. I'll show you that. Or you could make your own blueprint. So I'll say create blueprint, and you can pick up one from the sample, like ISO, UK NHS, UK official. You can pick one from the sample, or you can create your own blueprint. So you could start by creating a blank blueprint. I'll say demo CAF2, putting a description and the location, which is my subscription. And then you define the artifacts. So the artifacts would be the resource group, what is where you are, or the ARM template, or the policy. So you go about specifying the artifacts. So I can put the policy initiatives as artifacts. So you go about choosing it from a template, or you create your own blueprint template. So once you have created the blueprint template, let me just kill this one. I'll show you the one which is already existing. In this, there is a blueprint where we have an assigned subscription. We are doing multiple policies, and we have a resource group. And in the resource group, we have an ARM template for log analytics and deployment of Key Vault. Then we have a resource group for networks, my first application, and my identity service. So I can edit the blueprint, and then I can just go about publishing it. So I can just say edit, and I can follow the same process, and I can then go about publishing it. Now under the blueprint, the next piece is the assignment, and you go about assigning this. So it's, you can look at the view when it got deployed, what was the provisioning state, what was the date assignment date. So you can audit that piece as well. So you can do versioning as well on the blueprint. So you can create a custom blueprint, version 1, and then as you update the things, you can maintain the versioning control by putting version numbers, as you can see here in the demo. Very important feature. And once the blueprint has been created, you apply it to a scope, and then you track assignments. So that's a demo on policies. Now let's do a quick on Azure Security Center. I will connect to Azure Security Center. And I will show you a quick demo on the just-in-time capability that Security Center provides, and some of the messages that you would see. So we'll start with identity and access piece first. So it'll talk about my subscription, and okay, I think let me look at the scope of my view. I have all the subscriptions selected. So it's giving me a message, and now I think you should see. Let me just kill this. All right. So it's giving me a message that there are external accounts with owner permissions that should be removed, and some other alerts. And it also gives me a quick fix to fix an issue. So this is a quick view of how Security Center would support an identity and access compliance. I spoke about that in the slide deck. Now, a quick thing I want to show you under the compute. If you look at VMs and servers, you could enable just-in-time access through Security Center for a VM. So go about selecting a VM, and you could enable just-in-time access. So there are some recommendations given. You could enable just-in-time access because it was not on for a VM. So you can enable JIT. What does JIT do in the VM? In the background, it is working on a network security group so that it allows you RDP access for a given amount of time. So that's what this process does in the background. You select a VM, enable JIT. It relaxes the NSG rule, let's say for your RDP connection, for a specific amount of time. That's on the Security Center demo. Let's look at another demo where we will try to onboard the logs. I think I spoke about logs as well. So let's look at the Key Vault resource we had created today. And you can see under settings, there is a feature called as logs. So what this feature do? It allows you to take actions against or prohibit a malicious action to happen by locking that particular resource, so that either by accident or by a malicious intent, this critical resource should not get deleted. So I'll just say lock, and there are two types of lock: read-only lock or delete lock. So based on that, you can put this is critical resource, and if I click on OK, so there is a read-only, or there's a delete lock. I can edit that to a read-only lock as well. So I can say edit, I can change the lock type to read-only. Now if I would try to delete this particular resource, you can see it gave me a message saying that error occurred, and if you go to the details, it talks about the lock, and it says if I go to the lock now, as an admin, I have an option to edit, or I can just for the purpose of this demo, I can kill the lock as well. So that's a quick demo on the lock on the portal side. You could still do this activity. You could also do this activity through PowerShell. You use the command new-az resource lock, and you can then supply the parameters like a lock level, which could be cannot delete or read only, the lock name, which we specified in the UI, resource name, then the resource type, and the resource group name. So with these parameters in the PowerShell, you can work on that particular lock for a resource. And you should look at critical resources and enforce locks. You could do it at the resource group level as well. Now, so if I go to the resource group level, I will see the same. So let me just, for the demo, I'll open this. You could see there's an option under locks under settings. Now let's do another demo of IAM. So let me filter this to my subscription. So I am selecting my subscription, and let me just select this particular resource group. What I want to show it to you is IAM. So how do I onboard access control, role-based access control? So first things, you could look at the check access thing. Let's look at Megan. Oh, this is me. So so I can look at a particular user's action. So so I could just say, let me just want to see the permission for a specific user, and I can assign for this particular user. There's no role assignment, there's no deny assignment, he's not a classic administrator. So using check access, I can verify that, and then I can use roles and put the user into the specific role, owner or the resource specific role. So you can see there are resource specific roles: owner, contributor, reader, for various resources, and I can make a custom role as well. So if I'm looking at a backup reader role, I can look at permissions, and so you can see the role permissions for this particular role. So this is all about resource assignment, and you can see the role type as well. You can use PowerShell to create custom roles by looking at the JSON, opening the JSON, modifying the name, ID, actions, allow, deny actions, and the scope. That way you could work on the custom roles as well. So let's go back to this particular screen, and let's select this resource group. I'm going to close this screen, and let's go to the resource group one more time, and let's select the specific resource group, and I want to go to IAM one more time, and just to show you the role assignments and the deny assignment. So role-based access control model, you can go about creating or using the default roles or the custom roles, and then you can work through this whole process. So PowerShell could be your friend when you go about creating the custom roles. Okay, so that's on the demo for role-based access control. Let's look at the demo for how do you do subscription security. So let's go to Cost Management Portal. So if you remember my subscription list, I had some 22 odd subscriptions in the setup, and there are, okay, let me look at this filter first. Let me look at switch directory and do subscription. Okay, and I can look at the subscription properties, and I can do the same level of IAM control, locking control on my subscription. And what I'm trying to show it to you now is the way to transfer the subscription. So you could do transfer of billing ownership by selecting the subscription overview pane and saying transfer billing ownership. So it'll prompt you and visit. So for this demo, let me just connect to another subscription. Let's pick up a subscription where I'm allowed to do this activity. So it will be my okay, so we will try with this. Okay, so I think for this demo we will just okay, so we are into my second environment where I have got ownership permissions on specific subscriptions. So I will select a subscription and I can just say transfer billing ownership, and it will give me an option to specify the recipient email address. Subscription transfer billing to an email or another user, or subscription to another Azure AD tenant. So you could go with this kind of model. In terms of management, when I click on manage button, it will give me an option to go through the old classic portal way and click on transfer subscription through that model. So you could use the conventional method or the classic portal method, and it will come back to the same screen specifying the recipient email address or whether you're moving it to another Azure AD tenant. Okay, that was a quick demo on transferring billing ownership and a demo on how do you configure security at the subscription layer. Under the overview pane for a subscription, you could look at the recommendation, and it goes back to the security center, which is the demo I showed to you. One demo I think I should cover is around coverage part of it. So we'll again go back to the security center. Let's open the security center. So under Security Center, I'll try to show you the coverage first. So I've got 15 subscriptions which are in partially covered. There are some which are in fully covered. So if there is a subscription which is not in the managed boundary, it will show up under not covered, and then you can move that subscription to the covered section, and you can just say edit the plan for it and select standard instead of pricing, and you can look at the resource type as well for it. That's one on the security center piece I wanted to show. The other bit I wanted to show was my management group hierarchy, which is what I had explained in the slide. So if you see this, there are various management groups. Most of them are at the same level, and there are 21 subscriptions that are underneath the respective management group. So you create a hierarchy under root management group. You could have it like one level could be geographical, the other level could be departmental, the next level could be based on your environments, and then you move your subscriptions under those levels. So that's a quick one on moving management groups, and you could see that the various levels I have in this setup and the specific pricing tiers for it. Okay, so I've showed you the demo on policies. I've showed you the demo on how do you do role-based access control. We did a demo on locks. We did a demo on conditional access, key vault, privileged identity, and how would you work on subscriptions. So one quick thing I'll show you on the specific cost management piece. So cost management tool will allow you to get a single pane view of the usage and the invoicing for your environment. So for Azure, cost management is included, so it's free, but Azure cost management can also be used for third-party clouds. You can use cost management to do invoicing using the invoice tab. You can do scopes, you can do budgeting. So cost management tool helps you effectively manage your environment. So that's on the demo. Let's go back to the slide and cover the remaining part. Okay, so now the last section of our session today is sample questions. So let's look at some sample questions. It will give you a view of what you should expect in the exam. And I'll also not only walk you through the question, but give you the answer as well so that you are better prepared. The first question, your company has an Azure subscription and that's associated to an Azure AD tenant, contoso.com. You plan to enforce privileged identity management. Now, you have a user called Tom. That user would be enabling Azure AD PIM. So what you should be doing first, this is something that I had covered in my lesson 1 today. So would you assign Tom the owner role? You would instruct Tom to discover resources to manage and PIM. Would you instruct Tom to consent to PIM? Or would you assign Tom the global admin role? So for the user, what should be the first task? So the first task would be to ensure that the user Tom has the right role, which is the global admin role. So that's the kind of question you should expect from the privileged identity model section. Let's look at another question. And in this question, we talk about an organization, a company that has developed a web app using a PaaS service, which is Azure App Service. That PaaS service is using Azure AD authentication. You need to prevent the app from promoting users from OAuth 2.0 approvals. What you should be doing. I did that in the demo. I had shown this setting where in Azure AD configuration, you need to make sure that the right toggle is enabled. So there are options like, would you say in Azure AD do grant admin consent? In Azure AD, you would configure application rules. In Azure Key Vault, you would create an access policy. Or in Azure Key Vault, you would configure HSM protected keys. So you could also remove or think about options that don't make sense. In this one, Key Vault doesn't make any sense. So we are left with option 1 and 2. So the right answer for it would be the first one, which is grant admin consent. So with that, we will close this module. What we will do tomorrow, we will cover module number 2, which is implementing platform protection. In that, we will cover cloud security. How do you build a network? How would you secure a network? How would you implement host security? How would you do platform security enhancement and subscription security? We covered a lot of content today. we had 4 modules. We went through many lessons in each of the modules. What I want you to look at, you could go deep into this identity and access management session. You could also look at online resources on Microsoft.com/learn. You could also look at third-party resources like LinkedIn or Pluralsight. If you are interested in going deep into hands-on, you could look for instructor-led trainings from the Learning Partners portfolio. I've mentioned all these links in the slide. And you should also look at those micro-learning opportunities where you select the learning path, select the role as security engineer, you get those modules, and you go on each and every module. It'll have text, it'll have quizzes, it'll have those sandbox environments to prepare you for the exam. So with that, we'll end the session today. Thank you for attending the session, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session.
With this, we come to an end of today's event. We hope you enjoyed the session and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you once again for joining us today. Have a great day.